Welcome to the show. Today we're going to be interviewing some Pre-Socratics. First up, we got Thales here. Come on over, Thales.
How's it going? Pretty good.
So, Thales, you're credited with being the first true philosopher. What do you think about that?
Well, it's nice to know that I personally changed how people consider reality and the things that constantly surround them. People tend to be too caught up in their everyday lives, and sometimes we need to just stop and consider what's surrounding us. I'm proud to have inspired people to do so.
By taking note of all the things around us, you've claimed that there's a uniform matter that serves as a building block to all things. Can you elaborate on this?
Yes. There's an infinite variety of things that surround us, and to claim that they are all completely unique in their creation would be absurd. By considering this, I came to the realization that all things must be made up from the same fundamental stuff. What specifically that stuff is has become a matter of debate amongst many philosophers. Personally, however, I believe that water is the basic underlying material. This doesn't necessarily mean that all things are directly made up of the same water formations, though. I believe that water is arranged in unique ways for each type of material, which accounts for the differences between one object and another.
So, why water? Do you have any proof to support your claim that water is the actual underlying material?
Take a look around. The majority of the world is enveloped in bodies of water. Water has always been necessary for life, and it will always be crucial for the survival of any living things. Water plays such a significant role in the actual events that occur throughout the world. Great civilizations thrive when they are located near a reliable water source, while other civilizations crumble when their sources run dry. Water can also take the form of the three other fundamental elements. When frozen, water becomes a solid, earth. When water evaporates, it turns into water vapor, which is a form of air. When water fuels the burning sun, it helps create a source of fire. Water is clearly prevalent within everything in the world, and for that reason, I believe that it serves as the basic underlying material of all things.
Wow, I never really stopped to consider water like that. Your predecessors from the Belitist school have proposed other things to be the basic underlying material. What do you think about their ideas?
Well, I find it interesting to see what others believe. They definitely have some meaningful arguments that make sense, and the evidence that they bring forth to explain their thinking is refreshing. For example, an Anaximenes explanation for air being able to make up the four fundamental elements is similar to my own logic for water. I'm pleased to know that these youngsters have their own views that they can support with facts. On the other hand, I'm still holding on to my beliefs of water. I can understand where other philosophers get their beliefs from, but to me, it just seems as if water is truly the basic underlying matter.
Would it be correct to say that you share many ontological and metaphysical beliefs with the other pre-Socratic philosophers?
It kind of depends on how specific you want to be. On one hand, we can all agree that there is such an underlying material that makes up all living things. We believe that the universe as a whole is comprised of an underlying thing that is unique to each individual. This underlying material provides shape and characteristics to all things. While, on the other hand, we all have different opinions of what that actual material is. I believe that water makes up everything, while other philosophers have arguably stronger beliefs that other materials make up everything. However, in retrospect, I guess you would have to say that we all share similar ontological and metaphysical beliefs. Saying that our ontological and metaphysical beliefs differ simply due to our understanding of what the basic underlying material is would be a far-off thing to do.
As a whole, what separates the Pre-Socratics from the rest of the world's philosophers? What makes you guys special other than your belief in the underlying world stuff?
The way the world thought before my time was rigid. People almost always attributed our existence and the presence of this external world as a creation of a higher being, an all-powerful God. When I came along, however, I challenged this uniform belief. I wanted to see the world as it stood apart from any possible supernatural explanations. I took this and I passed it along. In actuality, we, the Pre-Socratics, were the first people to actually do this. We brought upon a new era that questioned the creation of things in the name of science alone. By learning to view the world through our own observations and abstract thinking, we disregarded any possible explanations that included reference to a God. We figured out how to take the world as it is and how to understand it.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your time, Thales. Do you have anything else before we part our ways?
Yeah, I actually have a joke if you want to hear it.
Okay.
What did Lake Erie say to Lake Michigan?
I'm not sure what.
Nothing. They just waved. See ya. Bye.
And another special thanks to Thales. Here we actually have Anaximander coming on the show. Welcome.
Thank you.
So, Anaximander, when theorizing about the basic world stuff, out of which everything arose, what made you reject air, water, fire, and earth?
Well, it could not have been any of those four traditional elements because one could rise above the other and it wouldn't be fair to the other three. The results would be horrific if this were to occur. This is what made me think that there might be something more primitive or powerful than the traditional four elements.
I know that you are influenced by the idea of justice in nature. What do you propose is this basic world stuff, since you don't agree with your teacher, Thales, who believes that it is water?
Well, first I reason that anything that has definite or defined qualities must lose them in time, which would involve dying. I believe that the fundamental stuff that everything came from has to be eternal and cannot be destroyed. But it also has to lack all definite qualities, or else it would die. I therefore name the element the apeiron, which means a neutral and indeterminate stuff that never ends in amount. It gives birth to all determinate objects that fill the world of perception.
Okay, going over.
Are you suggesting that there was and is nothing but this apeiron?
Well, at first, yes, but then something happened in which the four elements separated off the apeiron. The first element that separated off was the solid earth, which fell to the center. Second was water, which was placed over and throughout the earth. Air came next, which flows above the water, and fire was the last.
What would you characterize these thought processes as?
I would say that the essential thing is that my ideas can appeal to the most explanatory principles in sciences. These ideas represent scientific and naturalistic accounts in contrast to theologistic and supernaturalistic accounts that were previously speculated. Many former principles relied solely on religion and faith, but my theory is suggested through science. I, like Thales and some other Milesians, believe that there is more than just the gods controlling everything.
I understand that you believe in a sort of evolution of man and animals. Can you explain this to me a little bit?
The evolution of man and animals came from lower forms of life. Natural selection distinguishes the extinction and survival of species. I believe that life began at the edge of the sea in the slimy areas. The first forms of life were probably sea creatures. I consistently tell my students to not eat fish because they were once marine creatures themselves.
So, how did fish evolve into humans?
Well, some of the early forms of marine creatures started to edge onto the land and to grow organs that helped them to breathe outside of the water. After land creatures emerged, humans arrived after a long process of evolution. I believe that there were many strange animals before humans finally came into existence. The animals had to adjust with their environment to survive, but the ones who could not adjust ended up going extinct.
So, are there any other special things that we might not know about you?
Yeah, I recently drew a map of the known world as it is today. I don't believe that anyone else has done this yet, so I'm pretty proud of myself.
Very nice. Alright, thank you.
Alright, see you later.
Have a nice day.
Alright, well that was Anaximander. Now we have Anaximenes. Come on up.
How are you doing?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm doing well.
Alright, Anaximenes, can you briefly tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, as you know, my name is Anaximenes. I'm a philosopher. I was born in the year 585 BC, and I'm a member of the Milesian school, which is a group of philosophers that includes Thales, Anaximander, and myself. I'm actually a disciple of Anaximander and share multiple beliefs with him. My main thoughts came from questions dealing with cosmology, which is the study of the universe, cosmogony, which is the study of where the universe came from, and meteorology, the study of weather and climate and natural weather occurrences like volcanoes and rainbows.
Well, that's very interesting. Now, Anaximenes, what do you think is the basic world stuff?
Well, I think that the basic world stuff is air. Air is one of the four main elements, along with water, fire, and earth.
Why do you think air is the basic world stuff?
I think this for a few reasons, actually. Well, first, air is everywhere. It is basically the world's most infinite thing. It is like water, and it can take the shape of anything or transform around anything. The second reason I believe this is because Anaximander's basic stuff, apeiron, seems to have a lacking explanation. It doesn't have the diversity or abundance that air does.
Oh, really? How else can you support this belief?
Well, air can be transformed into a solid or liquid. Air is a cause of condensation. When this happens, the air becomes water from being packed tightly together, or cooled, thus creating a liquid. When air in its liquid form is packed even more tightly or cooled even more, it becomes an ice, a solid. And just as the opposite, when air is heated up from a solid, it becomes a liquid, then steam or mist, and then air, and then fire comes from air.
Can you elaborate on how air can become water or fire?
Well, of course. Take your hand and blow on it really hard. It should feel cold. This is so because the air you're blowing is compressed together and is thicker. Now take your hand again and blow on it softly. It feels warmer, right?
Yeah.
This is because the air is more scattered and is thinner, which makes it warmer.
How do your beliefs differ from Anaximander's belief of the apeiron, Thales' belief of water, or Democritus' belief of atoms as the basic world stuff?
Well, Anaximander believes that apeiron is the basic world stuff and is made of the four elements, earth, water, air, and fire. My idea differs because earth doesn't come about from air. Thales believes that the basic world stuff is water. Our ideas are similar because water can be turned into a solid or air, and then into fire, just as air can be turned into fire, or can be turned into water then a solid. I don't really know much about this Democritus fellow who believes that atoms make up the world. Actually, I don't think he exists right now.
Doesn't your belief of air as the basic stuff have something to do with the human soul?
Yes, actually. You see, I believe that air brings us together in our soul, and if you take a look around, I feel it is synonymous to breathe and air surrounding the entire world. I believe the air, as in the soul, holds a person together like the air of the world holds the world together.
Whatever happened to the Malaysian school?
As I said earlier, Thales, Anaximander, and I are all made up the Milesian school. It came to an end with me, but the ideas of science and Western culture stuck around in the Persian Empire. The Persian Empire was founded by Cyrus the Great, and it spread all over to places like Lydia and Greece. But I don't know much more. I don't know anything that happened after the year 524 BC.
Alright, well thank you for coming on the show today.
Yep, thank you for having me.
Yep. Alright, that was Anaximenes, and now we're going to have with us Democritus, a very forward thinker in his time and a student of the founder of the school of atomism, Leucippus. Before we get into the deep philosophical questions, I want to ask you a little bit about yourself. Can you tell us where you're from, when you were born, what you've been doing with all your life, and any other little things about you besides your theories?
Well, that might actually be the most difficult question you asked me. It's been such a long time, thousands of years, since my birth, that I can hardly remember the exact date and place. But I believe it was around 460 BC in Abderus, or maybe it was Miletus. I can't say exactly. I'm really a student of all the arts and sciences. I've spent most of my life doing many things other than just philosophy, like music, math, even cosmology. I spent most of my life simply pursuing my studies, so I think we should discuss those.
Alright, we'll do that. What exactly did you and Leucippus come up with the atomic theory?
That's a good question. You may have heard my contemporaries earlier describe the makeup of the world as being water, fire, air, or even a peyron. Unfortunately, all these theories are fundamentally flawed. Me and my teacher Leucippus sought to solve the problem of the world stuff in addition to refuting Parmenides' ridiculous argument that change is impossible. We all can see with our own eyes that change occurs, and even though our senses sometimes may fool us, something as perennial and materialistically evident as change cannot be a mere illusion. And so, in order to put Parmenides in his place, my teacher came up with the atomic theory, and I perfected it.
It seems as if it was a real battle of intellects in your time. So tell us how exactly your theory solved the problem of change and was more realistic than the other world stuff theories.
Well, you see, Parmenides claimed that change was impossible unless something came from nothing, which we all know is obviously impossible. The problem with this is that he oversimplified things by assuming that we simply perceive what something is, or it's indivisible. However, were this not true, and what we see, such as the chairs that you and I are sitting in, are actually composed of millions and billions of tiny particles, change would very well be possible by means of these particles arranging and rearranging. Change then isn't something that comes from nothing. It just seems that way because these particles aren't visible to the human eye. This is my and Leucippus's basic theory of atomism. The theory is much more complex than simply this, but I will address your question about the world stuff before I elaborate. You see, the problem with Thales and Anaximenes' view of metaphysical makeup of the world, which you have already heard, is that They try and take things with specific properties and apply them to all other things despite their immense differences. Although Anaximenes was admittedly very clever in proposing that the condensation and expansion of materials, like as the way liquids, solids, and gases are formed, but he was incorrect in assuming that air was the only thing that could do this, just as with Thales and water. Water, air, earth, and fire are simply conglomerations of atoms, and they derive their unique characteristics from the way these atoms bond. Now with Anaximander' apeiron proposal, he was correct in assuming that there was a more basic component to the elements, but he failed to solve the problem of being when he simply assumed that elements magically appear from the apeiron. Therefore, my atomic theory is able to overcome all the pitfalls of the other theories of being, and it solves Parmenides' problem of becoming.
Well, that's certainly a theory ahead of its time. Now that you've addressed the question of basic world stuff, can you elaborate on the atomic theory more, seeing that it's clearly the most prominent of your works?
Why, of course. As I said, if we were to say that matter were composed of tiny, indivisible particles, we can say that things change as a result of these particles coming together in different ways. One might ask how this is possible. These tiny particles, also called atoms, have hooks and barbs and connectors on them that allow them to stick together when they collide. They move about in a nothingness or void, and they constantly come together and break apart. So even Earth is a mass of atoms existing in a larger conglomeration of atoms called a cosmos, which eventually will all change.
Allow me to briefly interrupt and ask you if you can direct your explanation in this direction of the void.
I was just about to get to that. Many of my contemporaries believe that the existence of a void or nothing was contradictory in and of itself, and simply by saying that nothing is something. Now, the problem with this is that it's merely a language constraint. Parmenides in particular assumed that nothing can't be something simply because our good old Greek language doesn't allow for such a statement to be logical. However, we can assume that the nothingness around us, or the void, is in fact the real thing. Think of it as a container, if you will. It's full of atoms in some areas while allowing them to move around in the emptiness and allow for change. This space is infinite, and so are the numbers of particles within it.
Truly enlightening stuff. Now, please give us the finishing touches on your atomic theory.
Well, when you look at everything proposed by me and my master, it is plain that it was quite apt in answering the question of our time. Now, not only did we come up with a great answer to the metaphysical question of being, but we also stumped that crazy Parmenides' ridiculous notion of the impossibility of change. However, I must admit that the atoms themselves do not change, only their arrangements do, so in a sense, matter doesn't change, only its form does.
Wow, I foresee this theory being around for a very long time. Now, we're a bit stretched for time, so could you give us a few closing remarks about how your views either differed from or elaborated those of Leucippus?
Certainly. I'll give you a very short summary since my other works are very immense, but I was actually able to apply our atomic theory to things that transcend simply the material world. Using the systematic thinking which led me to my theory, I was able to show that supposed supernatural phenomena were easily explainable through natural causes. Once, a man was killed because an eagle dropped a turtle on his head. Most people blame Zeus, but I didn't want to accept this view. I was able to observe that eagles often drop turtles on rocks to crack their shells, and this man was bald, so he looked like a rock from above. So the eagle dropped the turtle on him. In this way, all of our superstitions and even fears that result from unexplained events can be quelled by viewing phenomena as products of the arrangement and rearrangement of atoms.
That's very interesting. Thank you for coming on the show today. That's all for today, folks. I'd like to say again thank you to Thales, Anaximander, Anaximenes, and Democritus for their time today, and we'll see you again next week when we speak with Kant and Aristotle.